In 2014 I read 100 books. In 2015 I read 115 books. In 2016 I read a respectable 76 books. It's currently September of 2017 and I have read 11 books. And one of them was a novella. And one was a reread. You'd think that studying literature for 3 years and getting a degree would make you just love reading. But no, it's literally the opposite. Because if you love reading and then pursue an English degree, I mean, you're pretty much shitting where you eat. Because that degree ends, but you still have to go on reading. And it just isn't the same. It's like the second Becky in Roseanne. It's the same thing, but different. But sometimes you've just got to make like a Genji Cohen show and just keep going till the bitter end. So I'm going to talk about a couple books I read recently. The first book I'm going to talk about is The Edible Woman by Margaret Atwood. This is actually the second time I've read this novel. I'm not 100% sure why I reread this novel. I thought it was perfectly okay the first time I read it, and now I can confirm that it is still perfectly okay. It's a fairly simple plot. It's about a woman named Marion. She's in her mid-20s. She lives with her quirky feminist housemate. Then Marion gets engaged and she almost starves to death because she believes that everything she eats is alive. Classic Atwood. I wish the book were as good as that premise sounds. Most of the strange self-inflicted cannibalism stuff doesn't happen until near the very end. Meanwhile, most of the novel reads like an early draft of The Women's Room. It's a novel that I really wouldn't recommend until you're a kind of Atwood completionist. I mean, this was written in the mid-60s. It won't be another 20 years until she writes The Handmaid's Tale, and another 15 after that until The Blind Assassin. So overall, it's alright, you know. Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak is a 500-page long novel about snow. Most of you will be familiar with this because it was made into one of the most famous and successful movies of all time. It's Kris Jenner's favourite movie. The most absolute basic plot is Dr. Yuri Andreevich Zhivago falls in love with Lara Fyodorovna Gishar, but Zhivago is married to Tonya Alexandrovna Gromeko, whilst Lara is married to Pavel Pavlovich Antipov. All of this is set against the backdrop of the Russian Revolution. The whole novel is written as a pastiche of the 19th century Russian classics, and there are shades of like Pushkin and Tolstoy throughout, and Pasternak does a really great job with this. It is kind of crazy to think that this was first published in 1957. I thought this was honestly fantastic. It is the definition of a slow burner, and sometimes Pasternak will literally just stop the plot altogether and just have two characters like discuss metaphysics and ethics and God. But you do kind of come to expect that with Russian literature. Surprisingly, this didn't get very good reviews when it first came out. Vladimir Nabokov hated it and he called it clumsy, trite and melodramatic, which coincidentally is also my Tinder bio. And there are some moments where you're kind of like, oh, that character just happened to be there at that exact moment. Okay, Pasternak, I'll allow it. But overall I found this to be utterly brilliant and really worth the time and the effort you have to put into it. Irish writing is going through something of a renaissance right now, you know, with names such as Emma McBride and Lisa McInerney and Belinda McKeown and Danielle McLaughlin and Kevin Barry. Beatlebone is Kevin Barry's second novel, and it is something else. Some context is needed for the plot of this novel. In the late 1960s, John Lennon, famed wife and child beater and probably best known for being the husband of Yoko Ono, bought an island off the west coast of Ireland. In the 70s, it became a fairly big hippie commune, and this novel follows a journey that John Lennon takes in order to get to his island. Lennon wants to get to his island because he believes that it will cure his writer's block, and also during this time he was famously going through primal scream therapy, so he also believes that his island would be the perfect place for him to scream. I'm just going to quote directly from my Goodreads review for the next bit because it's a good review. The whole novel reads like a surrealist jaunt in the west of Ireland. Hints of du Maurier come through whilst the novel decides to tread along the recesses of the paranormal, whilst many of the characters themselves seem to be close relatives of the persons who inhabit the scripts of Martin McDonagh. I can't believe I do this shit for free. I genuinely thought this was a masterpiece. It really blew me away. Like, opening night of Follies at the Winter Garden, like, blown away. Barry has a very Joycean style, and the influence of Joyce is palatable throughout the novel. I mean, there are whole chapters in this book which are written like play scripts, which is almost a direct reference to the Circe chapter of Ulysses. And I think this novel really only further proves that when it comes to writing, Irish writers are just better than everyone else. Zadie Smith is a writer who I feel has accidentally stumbled into becoming a trusted name. I mean, in interviews she's great, in speeches she's great, her short stories are fairly good. As a novelist, no, she's fine. Swinton came out around this time last year, and it was met with probably some of the most divisive reviews that Zadie Smith has ever got. Some reviewers said it was, her best book yet. Other reviewers were kind of like, it's shit. I'm somewhere in the middle. The novel follows these two brown girls. One is our unnamed narrator and the other is Tracy, her friend. One girl is, upper middle class, the other girl is lower class. It's fairly standard Zadie Smith stuff. All of it takes place in northwest London, of course, and we just essentially follow the two girls as they grow up into adulthood. Now, the whole follow two girls from different social classes as they become friends and grow up trope has become so overdone in recent times. I mean, you think of Sula by Toni Morrison, you think of the Elena Ferrante novels, Maeve Binchy did it in Light a Penny Candle, Edna O'Brien, The Country Girls, of course. It's something that we've all come across before, and we've come across it many times. And whilst I'm not saying that Zadie Smith did really anything new with this trope, I will admit that despite its proliferation, it didn't really bother me. And to be honest, that kind of sums up my whole feeling towards the book. It didn't really bother me. I didn't hate it. I didn't even dislike it. I thought it was just fine, it was a solid 3 stars. If I have any, big criticism of the novel, it's the chapters that are set in West Africa. They don't really work. They kind of ruin the flow of the whole novel, and every time one of them came out, I skimmed the hell out of them. This is very much a minor work by Zadie Smith. I mean, you kind of wonder, will we ever reach the heights of White Teeth ever again? The final book I want to discuss is Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. I'd read Mohsin Hamid before. I'd read The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and that book was a trudge. So going into Exit West, I was apprehensive. Thankfully, I can say that this book is nothing like The Reluctant Fundamentalist. It's so much worse. Exit West makes The Reluctant Fundamentalist look like the Pickwick Papers. And whilst we're on the topic of Dickens, there are books by Dickens that I don't think are all that great. Barnaby Rudge isn't very good. Martin Chuzzlewit, I didn't really like it at all. Both of those novels are around 900 pages long. I finished them. Exit West is 231 pages. And I couldn't do it. Most of you will probably know the plot by now. It's about this couple who live in the Middle East and their city is being destroyed around them. However, there's these magical doors that appear every so often, and if you go through one of these doors, you end up somewhere else on the world. Now, the first part of the novel is genuinely good. It's about the couple, they're trying to live their lives and survive as their city is being destroyed around them, and I really enjoyed that. And then the doors happened. My problem with the doors, apart from the fact that it's literally a plot device stolen from Monsters, Inc., is that once you introduce a literal Deus Ex Machina device, which is what the doors are, you all of a sudden quash any threat, any paranoia, any fear, anything. There is no more danger. There is no more anxiety. Anytime something hazardous happens, those two will be going through a door like they were on fucking Takeshi's Castle. And it reached a point when I was reading it where I was like, so what's the point? There is no jeopardy. So I gave up. Honestly, the whole thing reads like something Philip K. Dick would have written on a bender and then immediately binned it once he read it sober. It's a mess. So those were a couple of books I read recently. If you enjoy my reviews, you can experience them in the much less exciting format of text by Adam Young Goodreads. If you're a masochist, you can even add me on Twitter at Bazpierce, and if you really hate yourself, you can follow me on Instagram. In the comments, write whatever you want. I don't care, I won't be reading them. And until next time,